Hey everyone, welcome to another Authentic Health podcast. I'm your host, Lacey, and today's guest is amazing. She is so intelligent, and I know her through the Dutch hormone testing. So she is one of the doctors on the team that I get to talk with about my clients' tests, and if I have any questions. They have a full team of doctors, and I got Kelly to come on the podcast. So, Dr. Kelly Ruef is a licensed naturopathic doctor who completed her medical education at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. She also completed a private residency at Pearl Natural Health in downtown Portland. And for undergraduate education, Dr. Ruef received a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry and cell biology with a minor in cognitive neuroscience from the University of California, San Diego. She has been a clinical educator for Precision Analytical, makers of the Dutch test, since 2019, and she spends most of her time educating on how urine testing can improve the field of women's and men's health. Currently, she's focusing on educating women worldwide on the benefits and risk of menopausal hormone replacement therapy. And you can find her on Instagram under at Dr. Kelly Ruef. That's DrKellylYRuef. So, we had a great conversation. I hope this really helps those out there. If you're interested in Dutch hormone testing, please let me know. All of the information will be down below, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Authentic Health podcast. I'm your host, Lacey, and I'm so excited about today's episode. I have Dr. Kelly Ruef today. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to go over your Dutch test results.
Yes. So today's topic, as you can see in the title, is all things Dutch. And I actually met Kelly. So she is on the team. Okay, correct me if I say this wrong. Okay, you're on the team of the Dutch providers that help us as Dutch providers who offer these tests, go through all the test results, and just kind of answer any of our questions if we have them.
Yeah, exactly. We call ourselves clinical educators. So we just meet with Dutch providers and we go over their patients' test results and help them interpret it.
I love that. I love that. So that's actually how we met, because I called in asking some questions and you were so incredibly helpful. And so I, of course, asked you to come on the podcast.
I like hearing that. You're always trying to help people. So I like the feedback.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. So before we dive into anything logistics, and like she said, we are going to pull up my test results so all of you guys can see. And if you're not watching the recording on YouTube, we will actually pull up the test. So if you want to see what the Dutch actual like test printout, I guess you could say, what the results actually look like, feel free to watch that video. But Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah, I want to know a little bit, and I know people are going to be interested in a little bit about you.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. I am a naturopathic physician. I did my undergrad down in San Diego where I studied biochemistry. So
Wow.
naturally, I kind of nerd out on hormone pathways. And I've been with Dutch for about 4 years now. It'll be 4 years in July or June. So it's coming up. Um, and I just love it. I just love the research. I love reading the research. I love learning about hormones and women's health and men's health. So that's primarily what I'm doing these days. And I'm also really interested in hormone replacement therapy for
Mhm.
postmenopausal women. So on my Instagram, that's mostly what I talk about these days.
Yes, and I will have all of your information linked, but where can everyone find you on Instagram?
Yeah, it's just Dr. Kelly Ruef, like DrKellylYRuef, as in Frank, not S as in snake or,
Perfect. And yes, I will have your Instagram tag. That's super informative. You're so intelligent. And so I'm so excited to have you today to dive into some of these topics, because I know I'm not the best at the marketing side of authentic health. It's something I'm working on. But I don't share as much about the Dutch as I would like to, of course. So let's just start from the basics. I know you and I know about the test, but if someone's listening and they're like, what is the Dutch test? What would be the, little spiel that you would give someone?
So I would say Dutch is actually an acronym for
Mhm.
dried urine testing for comprehensive hormones. So we're looking at sex hormones in the urine. We're looking at cortisol in the urine. We also look at cortisol in the saliva, and we're looking at a few organic acids also. So basically, we're testing like estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, uh, what else? Progesterone, but we
Mhm.
also test the metabolites, the downstream metabolites of these hormones. So we can see how is someone metabolizing their testosterone? Are they pushing it more down these more potent androgenic pathways that might cause hair loss or acne? Or are they pushing most of their testosterone down these less potent, less, we call it androgenic pathways, which actually might lead someone to feel symptoms of low androgens, like
Mhm.
low libido or difficulty building muscle mass or recovering from exercise or losing weight. We look at estrogen metabolism so we can see, are you metabolizing your estrogen in a healthy way, down a healthy pathway, or are you pushing more towards these potentially cancerous pathways
Mhm.
or these, we call them proliferative pathways that might worsen heavy bleeding or breast tenderness. So it's a very comprehensive test. It gives us more information than a serum test would, than
Mhm.
24-hour urine testing would, than saliva testing would. So a lot of people like to incorporate it in their practice.
Mhm. So someone that has had blood work and they'll say, do I also need the Dutch? It just gives much more in depth in like the pathways and metabolites, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Mhm.
usually in the blood, we're looking at estradiol,
Mhm.
total testosterone, free testosterone, maybe sex hormone binding globulin, but DHEAS, that's about it. With the Dutch
Mhm.
test, we're really seeing, we're looking at those levels, but we're also seeing how someone is metabolizing their hormones, which can really play an important role in the symptoms they're experiencing and their
Mhm.
risk for breast cancer. Um, but the Dutch test, we're looking at hormones in the urine. So they're
Mhm.
more like bioavailable hormones. They're all of the hormones that have been truly seen by the cells and metabolized and cleared out into the urine. So we're not looking at like total hormone. Like in the blood, you can
Mhm.
test total testosterone, and that's all the free testosterone, all the bioavailable testosterone, and all the testosterone that's bound up by proteins. So it's a
Mhm.
little different what we're looking at in the urine compared to serum, for example.
Absolutely. So yeah, just overall more in depth. And then I like that you touched on the symptoms. I feel like that's the big reason I, like Dutch and then became a Dutch provider for Authentic Health is because I actually didn't have Dutch testing for probably at least a year and a half of doing nutrition consults. And I always felt like there were some women that I was working with that on paper were doing all of the things we talked about, whether it was, the exercise, the sleep, the fiber, doing all of the quote unquote right things. And then they were
Mhm.
still something was off, just something was off that I couldn't put my finger on. And so when I started researching the Dutch, it really could be, like you said, maybe they're processing the testosterone more down the androgen pathway or, all of those things which we can't see, just possibly on the outward. I mean, there are some symptoms. And do you want to dive into some of the top symptoms you see with women that take the Dutch hormone test?
Oh yeah. I mean, we see everything, but
Mm-hmm.
the main things we see are probably women struggling to lose weight,
Mm-hmm.
women with mood issues, whether that's PMS right before they get their period, or
Mm-hmm.
whether that's just anxiety throughout the month. Uh, Energy, like fatigue, is a
Mm-hmm.
huge one also. So I would say that's what I see most often. But of course, we also see heavy bleeding, we see
Mm-hmm.
fibroids, we see breast tenderness, low libido,
Mm-hmm.
hair loss, acne, facial hair growth. So there's a lot of other ones too.
And I always say, I don't know if you've heard this saying, I'm sure you have, but like just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal or like healthy. And so I get a lot of the times clients or women will come to me and say, I have XYZ symptoms, and I was maybe given like a birth control or just told, it's just part of menopause, or it's just part of, postpartum. It is what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
we're finding that it doesn't have to be, it is what it is.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I know, because people they'll go see a provider and they'll just say, "Oh,
hmm
this is normal. Yeah, start just take birth control. That's going to fix
hmm
all your problems," which we know birth control just kind of suppresses everything. And
hmm
once you go back or once you go off the birth control, a lot of times
hmm
those problems will return if you really haven't addressed what was contributing to
hmm
those problems.
Absolutely. I did a whole presentation, and that was a big portion of it was like a post birth control syndrome, because it's not, quote unquote diagnosable, or it's not a diagnosable disease. But it's very common where those symptoms that the female was experiencing before come back, and sometimes they come back with vengeance. And so they think, oh, the birth control, the hormonal birth control was helping, whereas it was
hmm
really just masking or telling your body to suppress with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And along the way, it's lowering your testosterone, it's
Mm-hmm.
messing up your gut, leading to leaky gut, and it's depleting your
Mm-hmm.
nutrients. So, I mean, I was on birth control for, I don't know, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was 15 years. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful I didn't get
Yeah.
pregnant during those 15 years. But knowing what I know today, I may have chosen a different form of birth
Yeah.
control than the pill. So,
I'm right there with you. I think I was put on it. I think I was 13 or 14 for acne, which is
wow.
just crazy now to think, because I was literally starting high school. So, things were moving hormonally for sure. I was
hmm
in so many sports year round, and it was just like, okay, well, yes, I had acne. Like it's okay. My body was figuring things out, and I never got off of it until a little over a year ago. And then that's when I learned about the Dutch and started incorporating it. And then I took the test. I think I took it like 3 or 4 months, or maybe 4 or 5 months after I got off my hormonal birth control, because I did
hmm
want to try to at least naturally have a cycle, or at least see if my body would, because I hadn't had one in so long, because I didn't have one at all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at your test results, we'll see that
Mhm.
you are cycling and you are
Yes.
ovulating.
Yes.
So
And
it's a
that
good
was the big
sign.
one that I wanted to see. Not that we are trying to conceive right now, but I have heard and worked with women that they then are ready to conceive, and then they find out something's off, or you're not considered infertile or struggling until at least a year of trying unsuccessful. So I just personally didn't want to be ready and then something be off. So that's why I decided to take it.
Mhm.
So is there any other reasons or anything you would recommend, like different than the symptoms, like why you would recommend a female to take the Dutch?
Yeah. I mean, fertility is a big one, just
Mm-hmm.
preparing for the future. I think if people are able to, just getting baseline levels
Mm-hmm.
while they're young, even if they're feeling healthy and they're feeling great, I think getting baseline levels, whether it's the Dutch or whether it's even in serum, to know what your testosterone and your
Mm-hmm.
DHEAS is when you're in your 20s. Because then when you're in your 30s or 40s, maybe you're not feeling very well, you can test your testosterone. If it's the same
Mm-hmm.
or really similar, then maybe it's not because the testosterone has dropped off. Maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
But if you're
Oh,
like,
good point.
wow, my testosterone has really dropped off,
Mm-hmm.
which the androgens like testosterone and DHEA, we call them, those are the male sex hormones.
Mm-hmm.
They do naturally drop off as we get older, but sometimes they drop off much more quickly. And usually you
Mm-hmm.
see that in women who are chronically stressed, or they're not working out, they're not doing weightlifting, or they're over exercising, or they're
That's
kind of
interesting.
depleted in nutrients, or they're not sleeping well. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think even having a baseline test can be helpful.
Some people think, and I'm sure I did in the past, like, oh, well, I feel quote unquote fine. Like, why would I need to test? Or I don't think anything's wrong. Because unless I was a dietitian and unless I, knew some of those things, I probably wouldn't think to get off hormonal birth control to prepare my body,
hmm
or, even think to test because I feel fine,
Yeah,
but we don't
right.
know.
I mean, Even another example is like a postmenopausal woman.
Mm-hmm.
If she's overweight, she's obese, obesity is an independent risk factor for uterine cancer, endometrial
Mm-hmm.
cancer. And if, a lot of times when on the Dutch test, what I see is they've got high baseline estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're postmenopausal, their estrogen is in the luteal range. It's like
Oh, wow.
double or triple what I would expect. And it's
Mm-hmm.
because they're overweight, they have extra fat tissue, and that fat tissue has more aromatase activity. And
Yep.
aromatase is the enzyme that takes our androgens like DHA and testosterone and converts it over to estrogen. So we
Mm-hmm.
say in postmenopause, most of our estrogen is coming from our fat tissue because it's being aromatized
Mm-hmm.
from testosterone and DHA. And in these women who have just increased aromatase activity, they actually have high estrogen, but they're not ovulating anymore. So they have no progesterone to balance it.
Wow.
And no wonder a lot of, it's an independent risk factor for endometrial cancer because you get all that estrogen causing
Mm-hmm.
proliferation of the uterus and no progesterone to keep it in control.
Wow, that is so interesting. I will say the premenopause, menopause, post is definitely not my expertise, but I love learning about it. And, maybe one day, and I know that's a big passion of yours with the hormone replacement, treatment and things like that, and the consulting. But that's just so interesting. And we even said already that the Dutch can show risk factors for, certain cancers and things like that. So just being proactive, getting the test done so that what's going on, because the test actually will show, right, the
Mm-hmm.
aromatization and if the testosterone is getting pushed to the estrogen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It could give us an idea. Yeah, exactly.
that's so interesting. Okay, is there anything else kind of just general Dutch that you want to touch on before we pull up my test?
I think that sums it up. I think when we go through your test results,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a lot more can come up and we can actually kind of see what Dutch has to offer. So
Yes. Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
and before we go into it, just want to say I am a naturopathic doctor, but I'm not Lacey's doctor and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not anyone else's doctor. So we're not going to go into like specific treatment
Mm-hmm.
recommendations today. We're just going to go into kind of general overall treatment options.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what we did, this is Lacey's report, and we copied and pasted it just to get rid of all the identifying information. So this is not actually what the reports look like in their entirety. We kind of just like took the data and put it in a Word document. But this is the Dutch cycle mapping report. And basically the Dutch cycle mapping report, there's 4 graphs. There's 2 related to estrogen. We've got estradiol, which is our most biologically active estrogen. It's the most prominent estrogen in a cycling woman. And then we have estrone. Estrone is not as biologically active as estradiol, though it does cause proliferation. It's the most prominent estrogen in postmenopausal women.
Mm-hmm. And proliferation, for those that don't know.
Yes, it's kind of like tissue growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it causes
Mm-hmm.
more tissue growth. And then we have the progesterone metabolites. We've got beta pregnenolone and alpha pregnenolone, and those are progesterone metabolites. And if a woman is not supplementing with progesterone or pregnenolone, then our progesterone metabolites strongly correlate with serum progesterone. So when we're looking at your progesterone metabolites here, because you weren't taking progesterone, you weren't
Mm-hmm.
taking
Nope.
pregnenolone, this is actually what your progesterone would look like in the serum. It'd be
Very
similar.
cool.
So with your test here, we can see, we'll just dive into it,
Yeah.
that with the cycle mapping, I ask a few questions to myself. So when I'm reviewing it, I say, okay, when did the person ovulate?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's important. We don't want to ovulate too early or too late.
Mm-hmm.
How long is their luteal phase? And the luteal phase is the last 2 weeks of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So the luteal phase is it starts right after a woman ovulates, and it's when progesterone comes up. And the luteal phase, it's a timed sequence of events. It's kind of like you ovulate and then the timer starts going,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always going to be about 2 weeks in length. Within a certain amount of time after you release that egg, if it hasn't implanted, then you're going to get a period.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone has a long cycle, it's usually the time before ovulation that kind of lengthens out, gets
Okay.
long. And so here we can see that your estrogen is surging around cycle day, let's see, 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like you had about a 28-day cycle. So
And mine is basically 28 on the dot every single
wow.
time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's so not every woman has an exact 28-day cycle. A healthy cycle is about anywhere 25 to 35 days in length.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times with a 28-day cycle, women will have that estrogen surge around cycle day 13 or 14. And within 24 hours after estrogen surges, a woman will ovulate.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably ovulated around cycle day 13 or 14, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we can see that your estrogen got its highest point was 5.69. And you can see down here, the normal range for an ovulatory surge is 4 to
Mm-hmm.
12.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time I'll see women between like 5.5 and 8.5. So you're right in there. You're right in that range. And then of course I like to kind of estimate how long your luteal phase is. So I do 28 minus 13, which is 15. And a healthy
Mm-hmm.
luteal phase, remember it's the 2 weeks before you get your period, or the last 2
Yeah.
weeks of the cycle. A healthy luteal phase is about 13 to 15 days in length.
Okay. So
yeah.
So if someone, because I see a lot of women where their cycle is either on the longer end or it is not consistent. So as long as it's within somewhat of that range, whether it's, a little bit pushing to the 30 to 35, but as long as it's consistent, right, is okay. But if it's the short, then long, then miss, that is a red flag.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. So if someone's like 32 days, then 34 days, then 30 days, then 35 days, I'm not too worried.
Yeah.
But if it's like 25 days, then 35 days, then 40 days, they skip a
Mm-hmm.
cycle, 60 days, then that's
Mm-hmm.
more of an issue.
Yes. And then would you recommend the cycle mapping versus the complete for that woman?
Yeah, it can be helpful. Yeah,
Okay.
especially because you'll see so we have two other tests, the Dutch Complete and the Dutch Plus.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty much the same test, except the Dutch Plus, we're looking at salivary cortisol, whereas the Dutch Complete is urinary cortisol. So the Dutch Complete is all urine. You just collect urine all day.
And it is on dried strips. Some people are like,
yes.
How do I send back in urine? But you will go to the bathroom, you will urinate on a, what is that? Like, it's almost like parchment paper.
Yeah, it looks like parchment. It's like a little sample card and you pee on it, or you dip, you pee in a cup and you dip it in the cup. But it's really easy. Yeah, you just pee on it. Super easy. And then you let it dry for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm. Easy peasy. Okay, sorry. Yep. Didn't want to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. Okay. So, and I also look at estrogen in the luteal phase, because we do get another rise in estrogen in the luteal phase. Estrogen should come back up when progesterone comes up. So this is a very normal rise here. And your estrogen, in the luteal phase is getting around 2.08, 3.06, and the reference range is 1.8 to 4.5. So, pretty within range. Yeah. Awesome. With estrone, you can see here your estrone, for people who can actually see this, there's like these gray dotted or dashed lines. Those are the reference ranges, like the upper and lower reference ranges. And you can see with your estrone, you're hugging the lower end. So your estrone's a little on the low side. So overall, your estrogen might be a little kind of normal low. Yeah. And the cool thing here is after you had your estrogen surge, you ovulated. And I can tell you ovulated because if you look at your progesterone metabolites, they jump up. So normally baseline progesterone is made from the adrenals. There's not very much of it. It's very low. You can see here, very low numbers. But then after you ovulate, so when you ovulate, when the egg exits that follicle, the follicle turns into an organ called the corpus luteum. and the
Mhm.
corpus luteum starts making lots of progesterone. So you can see here that little bump up, that means you ovulated. That means your corpus luteum is making progesterone, but you can also see here that your progesterone is hugging the lower end of range. So
Mhm.
it's on the lower side. And so we say you ovulated, but maybe it was a weak ovulation.
Mhm. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to do the Dutch, being, on hormonal birth control for so long. I had no idea, if I was ovulating, and I was trying to catch it with a strip and it wasn't working. And so it at least made me feel better that my body was, whether it was, strong, or, progesterone did surge or maybe not as much. So at least the length of my cycle and like the highs and lows are getting in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you did ovulate. Progesterone, of course, we always think about it for fertility and for
Mhm.
pregnancy, for like maintaining a pregnancy. A lot of times, well, let's go down to your Dutch Plus results. So your progesterone, we calculate a serum equivalent of your
Mhm.
progesterone. The highest your progesterone got was about 5.6.
Mhm.
And if you measure it in the serum, it'd be about 5.6. But usually for fertility, we want it like at least 12
Oh,
or
wow.
closer to 15. If there's been recurrent pregnancy loss, then the research says even getting it closer to 20, 25 can be beneficial or helpful.
Mhm.
But yeah, progesterone, sometimes what we do is we support ovulation. People
Mhm.
use chase tree berry, also known as Vitex. It's an herb
Yeah.
that can support a regular cycle, can support ovulation, it can support progesterone production. But B6 can be helpful. Evening primrose
Mhm.
oil or borage oil can be helpful. And even eating vegetables that are orange, because they have the carotenoid
Mhm.
lutein in
I
them.
love
And
it.
lutein is important for corpus luteal cells.
That's so interesting. And that's why I love how nutrition plays such a role in hormones. And that's why I love the Dutch so much, is because we can actually see like how well our hormones are supported. And there's so much we can do through nutrition to help
Yeah.
it. And I find it fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so much. I mean, even regulating your blood sugars can help you ovulate.
Mhm. That's actually interesting that you said that. I just wore a Dexcom for the last 2 weeks, and I am like really diving into CGMs
Hmm.
for blood sugar, because that's a huge thing with not only, ovulation and a lot of those PCOS clients that we were talking about, and, all of the things. Blood sugars play such a role. So, yeah, another whole topic that we could,
They
dive
they
into,
really
but.
do. Oh my gosh. I'm like, once I get some more money, I want to do a CGM too. Just to
Yes.
just to see like how does stress affect my blood sugar?
Mm-hmm.
How does a
Yep.
bad night's sleep affect my blood sugar? Not even food. Like I'm interested in like
Mm-hmm.
when I work out, what happens? When I don't sleep well, what happens?
That was one thing that interested me, because like right when I started working out, it my blood sugar dropped, but then the more I was lifting, there is a little surge in blood sugar because your muscles are starting, glucose is getting pumped, and it's not like a bad surge per se. But that
Mhm.
was one thing, because I was like, why is my blood sugar increasing? But I learned that because I had never seen that real time data while I was working out.
A lot of people don't know that progesterone, some of the metabolites, the alpha metabolites, can actually act on GABA receptors in our brain and help us sleep and
Yes.
help us feel calm and help our PMS and help us, with our anxiety and our irritability and our anger. So it's
Hmm.
important, and it also helps with bone mineral density. So if we're not
Hmm.
ovulating, if we're not getting exposed to this endogenously produced progesterone, we're going to have less favorable outcomes with our bones.
That's
Mm.
so interesting. That's a topic that I've been learning a little bit more about, just like the importance of ovulation and like the bone density and just general healthy aging, how important it is for women to ovulate. And again, that just then puts my mind to, okay, well, I was on hormonal birth control, not ovulating for
Yes.
15 years. And I'm like, ooh, red flag, like light bulb going off, like what's going on? And I do want to say, like, I feel like I talk about hormonal birth control and some people are like, oh, so you're totally against it. I am not here to say that hormonal birth control is a blanket statement. No one should take it. I wish I was more informed when I was younger taking it. And so that's why I choose to talk about it. That's it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a lifesaver for some people. Like
Mhm.
progesterone, it's awesome. I think they call it like the happy hormone or the feel-good
Yeah.
hormone. Uh,
That's so
then we've got estrogen. And estrogen gets a bad rap. A lot of people
Mhm.
are afraid of estrogen because they think about breast cancer and they think about
Mhm.
PMS and breast tenderness. And um, but estrogen, it's like Goldilocks. You need it in the right amount. It's
Mhm.
actually really important. If you have chronically low estrogen, you're over time, you're going to have issues with regulating your blood sugars. You might not have
Mhm.
the positive effects on your cardiovascular system. Um, cognition, it really supports our
Mhm.
brain and thinking. You might have a little more brain fog. Of course, with low estrogen women, even young women, even cycling women, if their estrogen gets too low, can have hot flashes.
Oh, wow.
Women can have joint pain.
Mhm.
Um, So, yeah, it's important for bone mineral density, obviously. In men,
Mhm.
it's really important or really interesting in men, even if their testosterone is fine, if they have low estrogen, it's going to negatively affect their bones.
Oh, wow. I didn't know. Men's health is definitely not my forte, but I did not know that. I mean, I know
Yeah.
how important the balance of them all are. Like when I
Yes.
see a client with high estrogen, low progesterone, like we want that balance for sure.
Hmm.
But I did not know that with men's health. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And that actually brings up a really good point here. With the estrogen, your estrogen dial is pointing much higher than your progesterone
Hmm.
dial. So this could set you up for symptoms of estrogen dominance.
Hmm.
So even though your estradiol, your estrogen isn't above range, you could still have these symptoms of estrogen
Yeah.
dominance, like the heavy bleeding, the breast tenderness, the PMS, even
Hmm.
if um, your estrogen's not above range. So
That is a really good point.
to some of the other markers, I'm just gonna scroll down. This is page 3 of a Dutch Plus
I love this
report.
page. Makes
Yeah.
my brain happy.
Yeah, this is kind of where, I mean, it looks very, like for people who haven't seen this before, it's very confusing,
Hmm.
but it all has its little place and makes sense after you go through it.
Yeah.
So the progesterone up here at the top right, this is the progesterone that we were talking about. And these are the two progesterone metabolites. If you take the weighted average of the two, you get this top progesterone. So this is like your overall progesterone.
Hmm.
And in between the two stars is the luteal range. Remember, the luteal phase is the
Hmm.
last 2 weeks of the cycle when the progesterone comes up. And then this little purple band, that's the postmenopausal range. So usually if a woman hasn't ovulated, her progesterone will be down here in the postmenopausal range. Because when
Hmm.
the corpus luteum isn't making progesterone, then you just got your baseline progesterone from the adrenals.
Hmm.
And it's similar to what a postmenopausal woman would have, maybe a little bit higher, but pretty similar.
So if she didn't have a cycle mapping test, because that test is a month long and it's a lot.
Hmm.
If she did, if she was a cycling female, younger, not in that postmenopausal range or age, this
Yep.
could be a flag that she did not ovulate.
Yeah. If her progesterone, her overall progesterone is pointing down in this little purple band
Mm-hmm.
or really close to it, yeah, could be a sign. If the progesterone is in between these two stars, then it's likely that she ovulated. If
Very
it's
cool.
just below the star, it's a little
Hit or
unknown.
miss.
I mean, I still think that maybe they ovulated, but it's good to know that progesterone metabolites can elevate even with stress. Like they can elevate just a little bit with stress.
Hmm. Yes.
But yeah, we have our estrogen metabolism pathways here. So of course we have estrone, estradiol, and estriol.
Hmm.
And we said estradiol is the most biologically active estrogen. But estrone, it's also active in our bodies,
Hmm.
just maybe not as active as estradiol. Um, estriol, estriol is like a metabolite of estradiol. So estriol is a really weak estrogen. It has
Hmm.
some anti-inflammatory, maybe anti-cancer benefits. And estriol is just a metabolite of estradiol. So what we want to look at here is the phase 1 and the phase 2
Hmm.
metabolites.
This is my
So
favorite part.
yeah, I'll try to
It's
make
just
it.
so fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool that we measure these. I'll try to make it as clear as possible. So we have estrogen in our body. We make it every month, but it has to be cleared out of our body because we're making it, we're constantly making it. And around
Mhm,
ovulation, we're making a lot of it. So the body has to be able to make it and then get rid of it, kind of
mhm,
reset, make it and get rid of it. And some of this estrogen can be, how would you put it? We say conjugated, can be conjugated with
mhm,
another molecule and eliminated. But some of it actually goes through we call phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism. So phase 1 and phase 2 mostly happens in the liver, but some of it happens outside of the liver. Remember, the liver is our major detox organ,
mhm.
right?
So important. The liver
Really?
is real important.
Yes,
Everyone
yes.
out there listening, the liver is very important.
And what happens in phase 1 is estrone and estradiol, they get oxidized.
Mhm,
So they just get turned into these phase 1 metabolites that are a little reactive, a little rowdy. They can cause DNA damage. They can
mhm,
cause proliferation, which is that when the tissue starts kind of growing. Um, so we don't want them in phase 1 for too long. You
mhm,
know, we need to make sure phase 2 is working well so we can take those reactive and rowdy phase 1 metabolites and move them over to phase 2 where they're, more well behaved and they're
mhm,
very stable and they're not going to cause DNA damage
mhm.
or
I
they're
always had I think I got this. I did a class with another dietitian just talking through, the Dutch, and she explained it like you have to fill up the bathtub, obviously, to take the bath, but then you have to pull the plug to get it down to the drain and, the sewer where it needs to go. And if that never
hmm
happens, then that backup and that buildup can occur.
yeah, exactly. And that kind of leads us to another point is after phase 2, phase 3 is when we eliminate these metabolites in the
Mhm.
stool
Yep.
or when we pee them out. So it's really important to work backwards. Like
Hmm.
if I'm really constipated and I'm just not going for 10 days straight,
Hmm.
everything's going to back up.
Yeah. That's definitely
Face.
why, if any of my clients are listening, that's why we have a question of about bowel movements. Like, and I get
hmm
some, oh, not to be TMI. I'm like, no, we need to talk TMI because I need to know, how are they, how often, all of the things, because this right here, this is why women, I mean, and men, but definitely women need to have, quality bowel movements.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Got to poop every day,
Hmm.
at least every day.
Hmm. Yep.
um, I know everyone has different opinions, but I really do think 1 to 3 times a day. So super
Hmm.
important. So with phase 1, we can see estrone here. Estrone can be metabolized into this 2-OH E1, this 4-OH E1, or this 16-OH E1 metabolites. And we want women and men to metabolize most of their estrogen down the 2-OH E1 pathway because
Hmm.
it's the most stable pathway. It can still cause some DNA damage, but it's not as rowdy, doesn't get as crazy as the 4-OH. The 4-OH is the one that we worry about potentially becoming reactive and causing DNA damage.
Hmm.
You know, and the DNA damage can lead over time, over years and years and years, to breast cancer or uterine
Hmm.
cancer or like prostate cancer in men.
Hmm.
And then we've got the 16-OHE1, which is what we call a proliferative estrogen. It makes tissue grow. And it's not great if it's elevated. If it's too high, you can get breast tenderness, you can get heavy bleeding, it might worsen endometriosis or uterine
Hmm.
fibroids. And in men, maybe even lead to some prostate tissue growth and prostate
Mm.
issues. But we don't want it to be too low because it does help even with bone
Yeah.
growth. But my rule of thumb is like, for example, here, your 16-OH percentage, remember these are the percentages
Hmm.
of the 3 phase 1 metabolites in this pie chart. And basically it tells us how much or what percentage of your phase 1 metabolites are in the most stable 2-OH form. what percentage of your phase 1 metabolites are in the potentially carcinogenic 4-OH form, and what percentage are in the 16-OH form. And your 16-OH percentage, the reference range is 13 to 30. You're at 5, so it's low. If you look at your actual dial, it's like in the postmenopausal range. It's low. So your 16-OH, it's just low. But my rule of thumb is if your estradiol and your estrone are within range, which looks like they are, then you're probably getting plenty of estrogen activity on the bones. And this is a major, the CYP3A4, this is an enzyme that actually converts estrone to 16-OHE1. And it's a major detox enzyme. Like it's involved in detoxing a lot of things from your body, including medications. So, there's certain things we can do to speed up enzymes or to slow them down. But with this particular one, the CYP3A4, we say, speed it up or slow it down at your own risk. And if you're taking a medication that's metabolized by this enzyme, just know if you speed up this enzyme or slow it down, it's going to affect how that medication works in your body.
And when you say speed up or slow down, does that mean through like food and lifestyle habits, or is it a supplement that someone would be taking to then do that?
A lot of times it's foods or herbs or lifestyle things. So like the CYP3A4, we know pesticides will speed it up. We know obesity will speed it up. We know a diet high in omega-6 fatty acids will speed it up. But we also know like peppermint will slow it down and grapefruit juice will slow it down. Probably why all like pretty much all the medication pamphlets are like, don't drink grapefruit juice with this medication.
I remember studying that in class. I was like, in my mind at the time, I was like, how random. Like,
yeah, I know, right?
Like grapefruit.
Yeah, it'll slow down this enzyme. It'll keep that drug in your body longer.
Wow.
So
fascinating.
And another cool one, St. John's wort that people usually take for mild to moderate depression will push the CYP3A4. So if a woman has heavy bleeding and breast tenderness and her 16-OHE1 is elevated and she's taking St. John's wort for depression, we might think of something else to use.
Yeah, that's so important.
But the good news, your 4-OH percentage is below 11%. That's awesome. And your dial, I always make sure that the 4-OH dial is pointing in the same direction or lower than the E1 and the E2 dials, the parent estrogens. And it is. That looks really good. It's not above range. It's not in the red. That's really good.
So just plain acting like I don't know what this is. Just for everyone listening. So if that dial was pointed heavily to the high side, which I have seen that many times. So the estrogen that the female is creating is getting pushed down this very oxidative pathway. What if I've had so many people be like, oh my gosh, like, and they start freaking out. I'm like, no, there are things that we can do. What would you recommend? And this could just be like general lifestyle. Like what does a female need to be looking for, or lifestyle nutrition to make sure she's supporting the healthy pathway? And you might be getting to that.
Yeah, there's actually, I was probably going to skip it. So I'm glad you asked. There's a lot of things you can do. So you can avoid things that speed up this CYP1B1 that makes the 4-OH. So that tends to be smoking, alcohol, let's see, inflammation, and environmental chemicals like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and smoked foods or PCBs.
Okay.
What else can you do? You can protect your DNA from the 4-OH if it becomes reactive. Remember, it can cause DNA damage. So you can protect your DNA with things like glutathione or NAC or these antioxidants or anti-inflammatory supplements. Even magnesium. Magnesium is really important for the enzyme that repairs your DNA. So I think about magnesium too. And then of course, 4-OH and 2-OH, they get methylated in phase 2. So that just means that in order to move them over to phase 2, where they're going to behave better, they're going to be more stable, we call it a methyl group. It's just a carbon with 3 hydrogens. We put this like methyl molecule on it, and then suddenly it's stable. It's pretty cool. It's like magic.
Mm-hmm.
But
Very cool.
so I look over here at your methylation activity, and there's a little fan gauge, and we want this red dial to point straight up or to the right. And you're doing pretty good. You're kind of at the bare minimum.
Mm-hmm.
You're pointing a little to the left, little towards low.
Mm-hmm.
So you could really support methylation. And methylation support, as you know, are the B vitamins, the magnesium, choline. Sometimes people increase choline-rich foods in their diet, like egg yolks, animal liver, salmon, pinto beans, flax seeds. But you'd have to eat a lot of flax seeds.
Yeah. Just another point why nutrition is so important. When I feel like I'm gonna say it till I die, but like all the colors, and I know so many times they're like, I know I need to eat my fruits and veggies and whole grains and all of those things, but it is so truly important. Like the symptoms that you're having, or whatever is going on, really, really could be supported through nutrition.
Yeah, because the like polyphenols, the flavonoids can kind of block the 4-OH pathway. And a lot of these diet things will push the healthy 2-OH pathway. It'll speed up the enzyme that makes 2-OH. So we know fish oil will do it. The cruciferous veggies, so
Yes.
kale and broccoli and cauliflower, even the carrot family veggies, carrots, celery, parsley, coriander, trying to get all these veggies in the diet on a day-to-day basis can be helpful. And fish oil, soy, flax seeds, diet low in sugar, like those are all going to be helpful for the 2-OH pathway. So a lot of this stuff is like, we know it already.
Yep.
It's
I think
kind of
people
confirmation.
like, yes. And I think understanding like, and this is why I like how this test is laid out, because I can actually basically drag down this green pathway and show, okay, I know me telling you eating, more cruciferous veggies is kind of like, okay, whatever, but actually seeing what's going on and thinking, okay, by incorporating more of these veggies, I am, helping my body support estrogen through the positive pathway. And there are so many supplements out there, like our DIMs and things like that, which can be helpful to women, but if they're not even doing the baseline, nutrition, then let's start there and let's start incorporating these without going the supplement route. And then of course, if that needs to happen later on, that is, but what's in this supplement is literally found in our broccolis and stuff. So it's like, let's try to get it from the whole foods and help these symptoms through whole food and nutrition. Yeah, I just love how this is laid out.
Yeah, that's the hope. And DIM, diindolylmethane, methane, and I3C, indole 3-carbinol, those are supplements people can get. They tend to help push that 2-OH pathway, which is good, but just know that DIM and I3C can lower estrogen levels, kind of takes estrogen out of circulation and pushes it mostly down the 2-OH pathway. And a lot of it, like DIM and I3C, especially DIM, it's kind of one of those supplements that women react to. And not every time, but it's one of those supplements that women can react to. And I always wonder if some of the women who take DIM, if maybe they have poor methylation. So they're like taking estrogen out of circulation, pushing them into phase 1, but then the phase 1,
where's it go?
is like backing up because they're not methylating and they're not pooping. and then they're having reactions because they have all these reactive phase 1 metabolites. So,
and I know some women who, and it's not anyone's fault, because I mean, this is kind of intense stuff. And without me even studying the Dutch, I probably wouldn't have known, all of this. But when you go into a store and you see something that says, fix hormonal imbalance, well, if someone is, thinking that they have that, whether it's high or low, they might take it. But if you're already low and then taking the little that you have, estrogen in circulation, and basically dumping it, can just push you into more negative symptoms. So definitely don't blanket take supplements just because something might say, fix hormonal imbalance. I see this all the time. I get messages, I'm sure you do too, like, hey, this ad just popped up for, PMS symptoms. Should I take it? And I'll see that on there. And I'm like, well, like that might not be the best option because we don't know, what's overall.
Oh, so true. So true. 100% agree. And Like even heavy bleeding. Heavy bleeding sometimes is not from high estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
It's from inflammation in the body, or sometimes people have a clotting disorder. And
Oh,
so
wow.
if,
Yeah.
like, let's say someone has low estrogen, but they have heavy bleeding because of clotting
Mm-hmm.
disorder, and they start taking DIM, which lowers
Mm-hmm.
their estrogen, then they start having like hot flashes and they can't sleep and they're moody and they're like, what's happening to me? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I like the, test, don't guess.
I love that.
Yeah, sometimes you can like guess, and if it doesn't
Yeah.
work out, you want to test for sure. But okay, and so let's look at your androgens.
Okay. And
And
for people that don't know what that word is.
yeah, it's like a male sex hormone. So
Mm-hmm.
testosterone, DHEA, but you'll notice here there's a lot of androgens like this, ethylquanolone and androsterone. These are
Mm-hmm.
androgens. No one's heard of them, but they're androgens.
Mm-mm.
They're downstream metabolites of DHEA that wind up in your urine. Who knew? Every time you urinate, all these hormones are
It's a
coming
lot.
out.
Who knew your urine could be so smart?
Um, one caveat to the Dutch testing, or one thing you have to look
Mm-hmm.
out for in urine testing in general, is something called a UGT deletion.
Mm-hmm.
So some people have a genetic variant that causes them to metabolize their testosterone into forms that we just don't measure in the urine.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the one thing to look out for in urine testing. If you see a low testosterone, especially if it's below 1
Mm-hmm.
in a young woman like yourself, you probably want to double check that in the serum.
Mm-hmm.
Did you test your testosterone in the serum?
Okay, everyone who's listening, I'm gonna be a hypocrite. I no, I haven't, and it's on my to-do list because needles and blood drawn make me want to pass out. Like I do not do well with blood. That's why I'm not in the surgical room. So it's I know I need to test, but it's just a big fear of mine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of times if I suspect the UGT deletion, I'll look here.
Mm-hmm.
This is page 2 of a Dutch Plus. I'll look at epitestosterone.
Mm-hmm.
And epitestosterone, it doesn't have really any effects in the body, but we measure it just to double check our
Mm-hmm.
testosterone result. So if someone's testosterone is really low, but their epitestosterone is normal or it's high, then
Mm-hmm.
I start thinking, okay, they might have the UGT deletion. But like yours, if you look at this, even your epitestosterone is below
Mm-hmm.
range. So I suspect you actually do have low testosterone.
Great. What is that? Playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
What for a 26-year-old, what could be going on, or like what lifestyle and nutrition to support that?
Yes. So, testosterone can be low. As I said before, it naturally drops off as we get older, just like in men, it
Mm-hmm.
naturally drops off, but it can drop off more quickly if a woman has a history of taking birth control, oral
Ding
contraceptives
ding.
or Accutane,
Mm-hmm.
or if, she's not getting quality sleep at night,
Mm-hmm.
or she's stressed out, or she's not exercising, not doing, weightlifting, or maybe she's over exercising. That will do it
Mm-hmm.
too.
And when I
Because
was taking, or when I did take this test, I know we talked before we started this recording, I was very, very stressed. It's something I've been working on. I was doing CrossFit and 100% overtraining, and I didn't count calories, but now that I have increased my calories and feel significantly better, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. It does make sense. It lines up.
yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
so interesting because when women are stressed, when they're overtraining, it'll negatively affect their adrenals.
Mm-hmm.
And the adrenals in a woman, no matter her age, the adrenals make the majority of her androgens.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're putting a lot of stress on our adrenals, over time, if it's chronic stress, the
Mm-hmm.
adrenals kind of downregulate and they just don't make as much cortisol, and usually they don't make as many androgens.
Mm-hmm.
And androgens are important. We always think of them as building muscle, and we think of them as helping with bones, our bone
Mm-hmm.
mineral density.
Mm-hmm.
But they also help with our overall sense of well-being, our confidence, our libido,
Mm-hmm.
our ability to recover from exercise, our cardiovascular system, our immune system, like our skin, our hair, they work on everything.
Mm-hmm. And this again makes sense. I definitely had low libido. I was not recovering. I was crashing in the afternoon, which I know we'll jump to that page. But like adrenals were basically shot. And one thing that when I was diving into my tests, our bodies don't really know mental versus physical stress. So like some people are like, oh, I'm not, really stressed, or I'm not overtraining, but they're on the mental side, mentally
Mm-hmm.
stressed or mentally fatigued. And so whether you're overtraining, under eating, lack of nutrients, or really stressed at work, home life stress, like it's all stress and inflammation, and, can affect cortisol the same. So I always like say to my clients, like, you need a day of rest. I call it sloth days. Like, it's okay to completely just chill. Like, you don't need to clean the house. You don't need to,
Mm-hmm.
check your emails on your phone while you're laying on your couch. Like, it all works together, physical and mental.
Yes, so true. And even perceived stress.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's pretend there's a fly and I'm deathly afraid of flies. And let's say like you're not afraid
Me
of
with
flies at
needles.
all. Yeah. So if you see a fly, you don't really get stressed out. You're like, oh, it's a
Mm-hmm.
fly. But like if I saw a fly, I start screaming and
Mm-hmm.
running and, trying to swat the fly. Like I might have a huge adrenal response, like a huge
Mm-hmm.
cortisol, I should say HPA axis response, but like a huge
Mm-hmm.
cortisol adrenaline response. And the body doesn't understand a real threat versus a
Mm-hmm.
perceived threat.
Mm-hmm.
So what's
I
stressful for
actually saw
me?
that on one of my clients' tests. She had
Yeah.
kind of a decent surge around that like 3, 4 p.m. And I was like, maybe, I don't know. I was like, what is it? And she goes, I pick up my kids. And so it was like that mentality of stressing her out, thinking, okay, I just finished work. I pick up kids. Now my stressful at home. And
Yes.
which, I mean, obviously I can't, work through her having 2 young kids at home, and it's kind of a crazy hectic schedule right now. But it's just interesting because I don't think people think like physiologically, in like internally, that does make a big difference. And over time, like you were saying, the chronicness of it, every day doing that, then the adrenals can do opposite and shut down, like just fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look at your adrenals. Yeah.
Sorry if I kept jumped you ahead.
No, no, that's exactly where we're going. Because whenever I see low testosterone, low
Hmm.
DHEA, I always go to the adrenals because, the
Hmm.
adrenals are making most of our androgens.
Hmm.
And a lot of times I'll see low cortisol, especially metabolized cortisol. So we
Hmm.
measure cortisol, the major cortisol metabolites. So when the body's done with cortisol, it metabolizes it into these like THE, THF metabolites. And
Hmm.
they're no longer active, they can't be reactivated or converted back into cortisol, but they're just waste products and we pee them out and we measure them. And if you have a lot of cortisol metabolites in your urine, you probably made a lot of cortisol that day.
Hmm.
If you only have a little bit of cortisol metabolites in your urine like you do, then you probably didn't make much cortisol that day.
Hmm. Yep.
So the metabolized cortisol tells us how much cortisol did your adrenals make that day.
Hmm.
Whereas when we look at these graphs of free cortisol and free cortisone, that tells us more, what did cortisol levels look like in your blood
Hmm.
throughout the day? And yours are low too. So,
Hmm. Yeah. For those that are not watching, which you should watch because this is interesting, my metabolized cortisol dial isn't even registering. It is so low. Like it is completely on the on the bottom
it's
edge.
pretty low.
It's pretty low.
The good news is you do have somewhat of a diurnal pattern,
Hmm.
and cortisol naturally should be highest in the morning. It reaches
Hmm.
its highest point about 30 minutes or 45 minutes after we wake up. And then it should naturally decline throughout the day
Hmm.
and be the lowest at night before we go to sleep so that we can actually go to sleep.
Hmm.
Because
Yep.
remember, cortisol, like what does cortisol do in the body? It kind of helps prepare your body to run away from something.
Hmm.
It might shunt blood away from your digestive organs into your limbs so you can run away.
Hmm.
What else does cortisol do? It's anti-inflammatory.
Hmm.
So if you're injured or if you just have higher inflammation in your body, cortisol can elevate. It's a glucocorticoid,
Hmm.
glucose. It helps regulate sugar. So if you skip breakfast, your blood sugar, dives
Hmm.
down low, and your adrenals make cortisol in response
Hmm.
to help elevate your blood sugar. Because cortisol goes to the liver, and cortisol says like, "Hey, liver, I know you got some stored sugar in there.
Mm-hmm.
You release it into the blood. We're getting a little low.
Mm-hmm.
But cortisol can also help you run away from a bear. So if you've ever had this experience where you skip a meal and then you start feeling a little like wired or a
Mm-hmm.
little moody, or it could be cortisol.
Yep. I love like talking through those physical, like how you could feeling like the shaking, the irritable, the crash. Like, so I always ask, do you feel like you need caffeine in the afternoon? Well, that could be a blood sugar crash from your lunch not being, high enough in protein or fiber to maintain those blood sugars. I see that a lot. So when she says like the diurnal, if you're not looking, it's, within that first 30 minutes, basically to the hour, you should see that spike and then it should drop off. Where I do see a lot of these graphs where it's basically flatlined, and then the afternoon is when it spikes, and then it's high at night. So it's like the females is opposite too. So
Yeah.
just super interesting how our
Yeah.
bodies work and what this can show.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't want cortisol to be too high.
Mm-mm.
And you don't want it to be too low. It's kind of like
Mhm.
Goldilocks, like estrogen. Because
Yes.
cortisol, if it's too high, it's also not good for your bones.
Hmm.
It's almost like, it's a glucocorticoid. And if you think about it, like a lot of people know prednisone isn't good
Hmm.
for your bones. And prednisone is just a synthetic glucocorticoid. So
Hmm.
if you got high cortisol long term, you can have mood issues, you can have digestive problems, you're more at risk for stroke, for heart attack, for osteoporosis, like the list
Hmm.
goes on.
Yeah.
And over time, like the body is wise. If you have high
Hmm.
cortisol over time, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. Maybe not, but like over time, high cortisol down regulates the brain. The brain is like, okay, it's not sustainable to have high cortisol forever. I'm going to tell the adrenals to not make as much. And then you have low
Hmm.
cortisol.
Hmm. Yep. 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 Yep.
And cortisol, you don't want it low because cortisol is important for lowering inflammation in your body. It's important for making you have energy and feel
Hmm.
alert and ready for the day. It's important for regulating your blood sugars. So if you've got low
Hmm.
cortisol, you might have issues with your energy, with your blood sugars, with
Hmm.
inflammation in your body, with weight loss. Like,
Yeah. And I was completely fatigued like during this time frame in life, like just no drive, or like I was struggling to get through the day 100%. And I would do
yeah.
my CrossFit in the morning, or my hard lifts in the morning. And
Hmm.
within a few hours, I was like feeling like I was about to fall asleep.
You're just crashing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So it makes me wonder how long you had high cortisol for.
Hmm.
Because in the beginning, when you stress your body out, whether it's exercise or just psychological stress or whatnot, you got high cortisol. And we
Hmm.
know high cortisol naturally leads to insulin resistance.
Hmm. Yep.
So with high cortisol, it can make it almost impossible to lose weight.
Hmm. And I know we talked, or I don't know if it was you or another um, doctor on the team, but that was one thing I talked with the clients, because she was struggling with weight loss, but her cortisol was basically like her body was holding on to so much cortisol that she couldn't lose weight, but to help with the cortisol, she needed to lose weight. But it was like this kind of vicious cycle that I feel like probably a lot of women get stuck in. Like, this was just one test I saw, but it was almost like, okay, well, how do I lose weight if, I'm struggling with this, but then to help with the cortisol, she needed to lose weight. And it was kind of
Hmm.
the circle.
Yes. Yes, I could see that. Because if we have extra fat tissue, especially around the
Hmm.
middle, the visceral
Hmm.
area, it can be inflammatory. And it can actually because of all the inflammation, it can put more strain on that HPA axis on the adrenals
Hmm.
to make more cortisol. And sometimes the way people get out of that loop is, and it's, all of these are not for everyone, so they can pick
Yeah.
and choose, but intermittent fasting,
Hmm.
not snacking, getting more protein in their meals, digesting their food, maybe taking
Hmm.
bitters or hydrochloric acid, or eating while they're sitting down and not on the run.
Hmm.
Not over exercising, but doing enough exercise, because exercise does increase your cells' sensitivity to insulin.
Hmm.
Um, lowering inflammation in the body, working on infections, whether it's a gut infection or some other infection. you know, removing exposures to heavy metals or to pesticides,
Mm-hmm.
or, not burning that really cheap candle,
Yep.
or using that perfume with formaldehyde in it, or the dryer sheets. There's
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, this is a whole nother thing. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many chemicals in our environment, in our water, that
Mm-hmm.
are endocrine disruptors, and they're really messing with us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think about cleaning products all the time, like because I've switched skincare, lotion, all of that. Like I'm good with that, but it's easy to go and grab, the window cleaner or, the dryer sheets. That's another one, which now I have switched out, but it's little things like that, or the wall plugs.
oh, the air fresheners.
Yeah, that you
Yeah,
put
those
in
are
the
the worst.
outlets.
Those are the
Yeah.
worst.
So if you're listening to that, let's just start trying to switch out to cleaner products.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
And you'll notice when you start
Mm-hmm.
moving away from those products, when you're around someone who uses like certain shampoo or a perfume, like it might just be really intense. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, I can really
Mm-hmm.
smell that.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, but of course, being oversensitive to smells could be a sign of like mold toxicity. So there's a lot that goes
Oh,
into it.
goodness.
But here with the saliva, we can also see your cortisol awakening response. And the cortisol
Mm-hmm.
awakening response is a burst of cortisol we get right in the morning when we wake up. And it really tells us about our resiliency and our ability to respond to a stressor. And your cortisol awakening response is a little on the lower side.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, besides supporting the adrenals, foundational support for the adrenals are usually the B vitamins, especially B5, B6, vitamin C, adaptogenic herbs, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
eleutherococcus or ashwagandha or holy basil, like you've heard of these things.
Yeah.
The cortisol awakening response, you can improve that even by working on brain function,
Mm-hmm.
supporting your brain. And there's some research around like maca, ginkgo, rosemary, fish oil, lion's mane, things that support the brain. And sometimes you'll see lower cortisol awakening responses in people who have had issues or something that's been affecting their brain, like sleep apnea or
Mm-hmm.
TBIs or concussions or PTSD. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was
Okay.
reading about alcohol once that,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I do read about alcohol a lot, but that alcohol can blunt cortisol awakening responses.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know exactly for sure, but it makes sense.
Yeah,
It
that was
definitely
just one
affects
thing.
our quality of sleep.
Yes. And definitely living in central Illinois where the sun is only out half the year, basically. The winters are super, super tough, at least on me. And I'm sure many people in this area. It's very gray, it's very
Mm,
cold. So we don't get out
hmm
much. And it's just kind of like that blah feeling.
mm.
So that doesn't surprise me either during when I took that test.
Yeah. Gosh, for sure. And sometimes with the adrenals, we really have to work on that circadian rhythm. We say
Mhm.
the adrenals are boring. They like to go to bed at the same time. They like to wake up at the same time.
Mhm.
Getting natural sunlight in the morning is ideal, but sometimes people have these sad lights that they stick
Mhm.
on. Um, and, getting exercise throughout the day, regulating our blood sugars, working on our stress, avoiding environmental toxins, clearing up infections. There's a
Mhm.
lot we can do for our adrenals. Anything that
Mhm.
stresses you out, it's going to
Yeah.
stress your adrenals.
Adrenals.
And then we have the organic acids. And these are kind of like byproducts in the body, or how do I say this? Like they can give us an idea about nutritional status.
Mhm.
They can give us a little bit idea about gut health, even neurotransmitter levels and inflammation levels. And yours overall looks pretty good. Your xanthronate is above range. Xanthronate is a B6 marker. So if B6
Mhm.
is low, xanthronate will elevate. And one thing I like to think about is xanthronate can actually complex with iron in your body and become
Mm.
oxidative. So if you're low in B6 and your xanthronate elevates, it can
Mhm.
actually cause more oxidative damage in the body, which can lead to actually like some blood sugar dysregulation.
That's so interesting. And everyone, like, I feel like I talked about this, but everyone digests and absorbs differently. So you and I could be taking the same exact panel of a multivitamin, the same exact diet, and these could be very different between us. So
Yes.
just, yeah, it's very cool and fascinating how individualized this is, because I wouldn't necessarily think, and me being a dietitian and I take a multivitamin and fish, I take all of the things, but my body may not be, absorbing it as well, or maybe I do need to increase more unique because I don't have a very unique diet, and I know diversifying the diet is so important. It's something I'm working on, but definitely adding maybe
Hmm.
some of those unique foods that I'm not used to.
Yes, 100%. Exactly. And
Mhm.
here we can see your dopamine metabolite, the HVA, and your norepinephrine and epinephrine metabolite, the VMA. And remember, epinephrine is another word for adrenaline.
Mhm.
And I often see these low if someone has low cortisol,
Mhm.
like low adrenal output in general, because the adrenals make a lot of our dopamine and our adrenaline.
Mhm.
Um, but I also see this a lot when people have low androgens, like low testosterone,
Mhm.
because testosterone actually plays a role in making dopamine. So you can also see these low if someone has low vitamin C or low B vitamins,
Mhm.
low protein intake, low tyrosine. Usually they're just not absorbing their protein.
Mhm.
But these, like basically, if someone has symptoms of low dopamine, low adrenaline, like they're
Mhm.
tired, they can't get going, they have low libido, it's hard to focus. They're just
Mhm.
like can't get out of bed and they're dragging throughout the day and they're eating chocolate or on social media to get little dopamine hits.
Yeah.
Then I might, really support the androgens like testosterone and
Mhm.
DHA and support those adrenals.
Mhm.
And when we support the adrenals, we naturally support the androgens. So a lot
Love
of times it
that.
goes back to the adrenals. Even for
Yeah.
like estrogen and ovulation, a lot of times it goes
Yep.
back to the adrenal.
Well, and I in the main presentation I did, that was like the big thing, because it was like, okay, so you have the lower high estrogen, or you have the lower high testosterone, and then the DHA. Okay, well, what's the root cause of it? Because yeah, we can help estrogen out here, but why is that estrogen high or low? Or why is that testosterone? Okay, well, let's get right back to the root. It's usually that
Hmm.
inflammation or the adrenal health that starts it, kind of that cascade.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would totally agree because a lot of things affect the adrenals. Like they're very sensitive. Which
Why are they so sensitive?
I think because they have a hand in everything. They're regulating the inflammation, they're regulating the blood sugar, they're helping you run away from the tiger. They're they're doing
Yes.
they're doing a lot.
Well, and in today's society, it's like if you ask anyone, like, oh, how's work going or how's life? If someone says, like, they're not stressed, or like they're cool as a cucumber, someone's like, oh, you're not working hard enough, or like, what? Like, that's a rare thing now. It's, I'm stressed, I'm busy at work, I have a lot going on with the kids, whatever it is. So it's
Mhm.
tough in today's with social media and all the things. It's like hustle, 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 when really it should be like, calm, calm, calm.
Yeah, it's seriously like I'm always thinking about the slow movement. There's something called the slow
Mhm.
movement. You could Google it. And just kind of, or just, people taking breaks from social media and
Mhm.
just trying to understand where the stressors are in their life. How can they minimize the stressors?
Mhm.
And even psychologically, is it perceived stress? Is it a real threat or is it just something in
Mhm.
my head? Am I just feeling inadequate that day? Like,
Ooh, I
you know,
love that. I love that, because whenever I get more on that side of things, because we all have our bad days. Like, I would like to say think I'm a pretty positive person, but of course we all have those days. So you have that, like what you just said, okay, maybe I'm not enough, or like maybe you're struggling, and then it just like spirals, and then you're just in this perceived stress day, like, oh, I'm a bad dietitian, or like I am not a good at work, or whatever
mhm,
it is, and then it just keeps going. So yeah, that working on that perceived stress, it can
yeah.
do more than just what we think, I think.
Yeah, and working on sense of self, because sometimes if we
Mhm.
have a poor sense of self, we will compensate by trying to be overproductive or by
Mhm.
doing more. Or, there's a lot of different patterns out there and cycles and So there's a lot to think about.
That
Um,
is now in my head. I know I've gone through this because I did this test. I don't know if the date is on there, but it's been several months. And now just going back over there, so I'm like, okay, I need to be doing that. Like, and it's always good to check back in things, whether, like I am a dietitian, but I still like to check in on nutrition and, have someone supporting me in workouts or like whatever it is,
mhm.
because it's always good to have that support and, have someone tell me, Lacey, you need to calm down. You don't need to be overproductive, like all of those things. You don't need to train as hard. Like all of those are good reminders that, I mean, I for sure needed.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too.
Hmm.
Life is not a race. That's what I always tell
Mm-mm.
myself. I have time. And if I don't get it done during my lifetime, it's okay.
I love that. I need your cool, calm, and collected
No,
because I'm like, everything has to get done now. And it's a toxic trait that I'm working
yeah. I mean,
on.
sometimes like things really do have to get done. And
Yeah.
sometimes I know people who have 5 jobs between the
Oh
two
my
of them because
goodness.
just to pay the bills, and
Yeah.
like sometimes we really do have to,
Hmm.
work overtime, but a lot of times I think we're pushing ourselves more than we need to, you know.
Hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree. Is there anything else on this test?
I would just say overall, it looks like since you have this low adrenal output, which could be from stress and
Hmm.
overtraining,
Hmm.
because there's low cortisol, that could be like kind of the root of a lot of issues.
Hmm.
Low adrenal output, you tend to see lower androgens like the low testosterone and the low DHEA, which can
Hmm.
result in more fatigue and low libido and difficulty
Hmm.
recovering from exercise. And a lot of times, the testosterone is important for follicle development. Remember, the
Hmm.
follicle is kind of what's growing that egg.
Hmm.
So when you improve the adrenals, when you improve testosterone and DHEA, that in turn can create a healthier follicle. And a healthier follicle will make healthier amounts of estrogen. And
Hmm.
usually you'll have a better ovulation and better progesterone production. So overall, I mean, a lot of times I'm working on the adrenals, but when I say working on the adrenals, it's not simple.
Hmm.
It's not over exercising, it's reducing the stress, it's
Hmm.
regulating the blood sugars. Like there's so much that goes into adrenal support,
Hmm.
but the payoff is so worth it because people start feeling better than they even knew they could feel. Sometimes they don't
Yep.
even realize they were feeling so bad.
Hmm.
And it all comes down to habits, changing one thing at a time, making those small steps and being consistent and keeping those habits. Like that's what gets people better.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. And what you said with you don't even realize how good you could feel, or like when you start to feel that. I work a lot with my clients with either disordered eating patterns or just intuitive eating in general. And it's once we start incorporating, these more nutrient dense foods, not because the other foods were bad, but because you truly can feel so much better. Your symptoms can decrease, fertility can improve, all these things. And that's where intuitive eating comes in, is like you're not choosing, this food over here because it's quote unquote, good versus bad. It's because I want to feel better. I want to be in a better mood. I want to be more productive at work, sleep better. Like I don't want to get diabetes down the line. And so it's like those small habits over time, and with supporting the adrenals, like I want to support my body now, feel better so that, I have a long, healthy life.
I love that. Exactly. I love that, especially not doing like this is good and this is bad,
Mm-hmm.
because that gets a lot of people in trouble. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just having grace with yourself. Like if you fall back into old patterns, it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Like that's actually a sign of growth. It's natural.
Oh, I
Everyone
love
falls
that.
back. Everyone
Yes.
falls back. So just having some grace with yourself and pretending like treat yourself how you would treat your best friend. I do that a lot. Like if
Oh,
I
I
do
love that.
something that I'm not proud of, it's kind of like, well, what, how, what would I say to my best friend right now?
Mm-hmm.
And just try to treat yourself um, as a friend, as good, the more self-love we have, the more we're going to be able to make it to the next level and to improve
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and to kind of keep going. not beat ourselves up so much.
Yes, I've never heard someone lay out that sentence that if you fall back, that means that you have growth. And that's such an easy, I mean, now thinking it's like an easy thing, but if you really think about that, because I have clients that would be like, oh, I fell back, or like, oh, I, wasn't disciplined enough. But like the fact that they felt like they fell back meant that they had that much growth. And
Hmm.
I've never thought about that. And I love that because there's
Yeah.
always room for growth, and the fact that you felt that you went back to old habits or whatever it was for that small percentage of time meant that
Hmm.
you had that great growth to get to that point further. So that's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I like it too.
Yes, I love that. All right, well, I mean, that was so great. I don't know if anyone watching, if that helps, or at least shared what the Dutch is and the incredible capabilities that it has. Like, this is just my one test, and that's why I call your team every single time, because every test is different, everyone is unique, and so you guys are the expert with it. So thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It was
You're
awesome.
you're so welcome. It was a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Well, is there anything you want to leave with anyone listening? I know you just said that all those great things, but I know I'll have all of your social media in the bottom so they can find you. But anything else?
Yeah. I would just say if you're a provider, you can join, you can set up an account with
Yes.
Dutch testing. If you're not a provider, if you're patient, you
Yeah.
can find providers like Lacey
Hmm.
on our website. I think it's the top right or the top left. There's a little
Hmm.
find a provider, and you type in your zip code, and it'll show you
Hmm.
people in your area that use the Dutch test. So,
Yes.
um,
And if I'm not the right one for you, or if you're a male listening, I don't think I have many male listeners, but if you are, I personally don't work with male clients. It's not my forte, but I will connect you with someone who does, to get you that test if that's what you want. So just let me know. And of course, you can ask Dr. Kelly as well. And yeah, all the information is on the Dutch website as well.
awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Your support means more than you know. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you could leave a kind review, subscribe to this podcast, as well as share this on your social media with a screenshot. I am blessed to have this opportunity to connect with individuals like you and hopefully bring you some happiness today. You are the reason Authentic Health is possible. I value all of you so much. If you'd like to get to know me a little bit more, you can find me on Instagram at Lacey_Authentic Health, as well as my website listed in the description below. So thank you again, and until the next episode, let's chase our best selves and make it a great day.